Hello and welcome back to this week's Splitgate Weekly. My name's Ben. I'm our community manager over at 1047, and I am joined this week by yet another special guest. This is Darek joining me. Darek is our lead game designer. Darek, how are you doing today?
Hey, hey, doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben. This is exciting.
Darek, for those who have no idea what a lead game designer does, do you want to give the short version of what your role looks like at the company?
Yeah, I've explained my role a few times. I think the way that I always explain it that hits home, I guess, or makes sense is like if you think about everything gameplay wise, that's my focus. So all the weapon balance, all the game mode balance, game mode value changes, all that fun stuff. Basically everything gameplay related. If it's in the game, I've probably had my hands on it, and if it's out of the game, then I probably haven't.
You heard Derek. So if there's something in the game that's really broken, you hate playing against it, that's his fault
Exactly.
directly. Nobody
Me.
else, not a single other person
Yep.
contributed. That's no, obviously that's a little more complicated than that. But this week we did want to focus in on balance specifically and just talk a little bit about what we're thinking of, what's really working well, what are we changing in our next update when it lands. Fallout from ranked a little bit now that we've had more time to get some data and really look at things a little bit further. Before we dive too into that, one thing just to follow up on as well, we did talk last week a lot about how kind of our studio wide goal right now is really focused on fixing the game, improving what's here, really trying to clean things up and hit on some of those big pain points that players are experiencing. Nothing's really changing there this week for that. So this is still another really heads down week for our team as we keep working on those really high priority things for us. So don't expect any huge updates on that front in this video, just because that is still ongoing. So we're just gonna dive right into balance specifically and talk a little bit about that. So, Derek, I think the first thing that you called out when we were talking beforehand about this was that number one, we gotta fix some broken stuff, as you put it. So
Yeah.
there's some pretty clear outliers in terms of things that are performing really well. I'm sure people can guess it what some of those are, but do you want to talk us through first what are the really things that are like this is kind of in that obviously broken camp or obviously overpowered. Broken might be a strong word, but what are the first things that like are kind of on our short list of changes?
Yeah. So I think the number one thing that you'll see if you play much ranked, Sabrask usage is pretty out of hand. There's a lot of Sabrask in pretty much every game across all skill levels, but especially at high skill. Um, it's really dominating usage, and part of that is like when we looked at usage rates before we released ranked, both usage rate and win rate, the effect of having a Sabrask on your team, it was the worst faction, both for like odds of winning a game. Like if you had a Sabrask, you were less likely to win a game. Especially if you had two or more, you were much less likely to win a game. Um, and then pick rates, it was the worst or like the lowest picked faction. So we had seen some things that we were like, like this, we were kind of turning an eye at, like, is this going to be a problem? But when you have those data points about people really aren't winning games and they're really not performing well when they pick Sabrask, it's hard to make big balance changes that then nerf Sabrask. Um, so we had made the one change previously about the Sabrask wall, but ranked came out, and obviously, like I said, Sabrask performing really well when people are really focused on the objective and trying to win. So we've got a few changes in the pipeline for that. One is just on the weapon front. I think there's two guns that Sabrask have that are really shining in ranked. One of those is the Sabrask SMG. So Sabrask SMG is just performing really well in ranked. It's as people are able to portal and get close, they're just performing way better than other guns. It's the top performing primary right now. So we've got to change to that to make it take an extra bullet to kill, which it should be a pretty sizable change. When we've made similar changes in the past, we've seen pretty big swings. We don't want to overdo it and kill the gun, but that's one change we have for the Sabrask SMG. And then the other gun that has really been standing out is the Sabrask shotgun. So similar thing in a casual lobby, the Sabrask shotgun has not been very good, or the plow, but in ranked, it's really been performing really well. So we're doing a couple things specifically to the Sabrask shotgun, and then a couple more game-wide things. So the two things that we're doing specifically to the shotgun is it's not going to be able to one-shot anymore, and then the consistency of its damage is going to be lower. So right now you get a lot of 85 damage shots, which combine that with a swap to your pistol, and people are going to die really, really fast. So we're going to lower that and take away the one-shot headshot potential, which we think will bring it a lot more in line. And then kind of the other half of that, outside of guns, is the kit itself. Sabrask's kit is just really good for objective play and trying to focus on the win. So, like I said, we're seeing Sabrask perform really well. And there's a couple of smaller changes that we're making to things like their equipments, but the biggest thing is the wall. We said last week we saw the issues with the wall. It's still just too strong. And the biggest thing that we're doing to address that is we're gonna take a big pass at the uptime of the Sabrask wall. So right now it's the same as other abilities. You get it every 50 seconds, which is drops down to 30 seconds if you have the team ability and the perk. But the baseline is 50 seconds before this update, and we're gonna increase that somewhere in the range of 75 seconds. I don't want to commit to that just in case we change it before we
EBD.
go live, but yeah, that's the kind of change we're looking at, a pretty substantial increase to just the cooldown. And then the other kind of lever that we're turning there to affect the uptime of this Rask wall is just how long it lasts when you place it. We're seeing a lot of gameplay in ranked where it's split ball, so you find a corner where they can't shoot you and you place your wall, and they can't portal there, they can't shoot you, and you're just there for a long time. And right now the Sabrask wall uptime is right around 13 seconds from when you place it to when it disappears. So we're going to lower that. Right now, again, I don't want to commit to the value, but the number we're looking at is it's going to last around 8 seconds instead of 13. So it just ticks faster and is up for less time. So that should pretty substantially lower the uptime of the Sabrask wall between those two changes. And from internal testing, we're feeling good about it. Obviously, until it's in your hands, you know, we're going to continue to monitor after it's in everybody's hands. But yeah, we're feeling good about those changes to Sabrask.
I think the wall is obviously one of the more hot topics in general, and I do think it was, in retrospect, pretty interesting to look back on a lot of the conversation after that wall change was made to only being able to be shot through from one side. I did see a number of people who were very confident that it was completely dead and gone, gutted. This ability is terrible now. So I think it is always interesting. Once you've had time to play with something, it's not always so easy as predicting it off of just the paper change alone, but
Yeah.
question for you in general, like I guess when you're looking at like something like the wall, which is interesting, and there's like a number of different things that make it strong. Like what with this one specifically, you talked about uptime being the main thing to look at. Like how do you in general decide like what is the thing about the wall or any ability that this is what's making it overpowered, or like is it like looking for what's going to be the most fun for someone to play around as opponent, like what's the way, like because another way you could nerf the wall is, hey, we're going to totally gut the amount of health it has and shorten that. Like,
Yeah.
what leads you to uptime specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's super case by case. I think I kind of walked through one of the behaviors that we were seeing, which was like, all right,
Yeah,
here's a split ball. I'm going to sit over in the corner and I'm going to place this wall, and it's guarded for 15 seconds because you can't portal behind me. And if you get in a gunfight with me, I can shoot you and you can't shoot me. Um, so that's kind of like the consistent thing across everything. I watch a lot of Splitgate too, a lot of gameplay from pros to casual players to everything in between. I watch people play and I just see like, okay, what is working for these people and what isn't, and then what's different for this subset of players, and then address it from there. So specifically, like we made that change to the wall being one way. The reason for that kind of change, and the reason for this change as well coming up, part of another thing we look at gameplay, we look at sentiment, and we look at data. um, the data that we look at with Rask is like casual players perform the worst with Rask. Basically, like a player is more likely to do well if they play a different faction. So the kind of problem solving like problem that you get into is like, how do I nerf Sabrask for one group of player while not nerfing it heavily for another group. So that was where the one way wall idea came from. Was like, when I watch people play that are really good, they do a lot of jiggling back and forth on that wall. Um, so where no matter where you are, it's like a one-way wall. Because even if you can portal behind me, I'll just back right off to the other side. Where when we watch a more casual player, they don't do that a lot, right? They're
Yeah.
very much like place the wall, sit behind it, and then get flanked. Um, and they don't know to jump to the other side of it. Um,
Or place the
so for
wall and
this
then get
change,
distracted and like run away. I'm like, it's too much fun for
yeah,
something else
exactly,
to go on.
exactly.
Like I'm barely playing behind it in that way. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're all good. Yeah, exactly. So another piece of data that we looked at for this change was, again, for a more casual player base, the wall is not performing, out of its bucket. But for more competitive players, it is. So one of the data points that we looked at that kind of informed this change was the more casual players don't use the wall as much as other abilities. Like, even if it didn't have a cooldown, just because it's more situation specific, they just aren't using the wall as much. Um, so that's kind of the way that we looked at like evening out that casual player to more competitive player. The advantages that they're getting from the wall is like the casual players aren't using the wall every 45 seconds. They're using it almost half as often as the other abilities, where competitive players, they're using it as soon as it comes up, like getting maximum value out of it. So the way that we kind of looked at evening that playing field and like nerfing it for competitive players without gutting it for more casual players is like, let's make that uptime lower. So, casual players aren't using it as often, so they won't notice as much a change to a longer cooldown, while competitive players are very consistently using it right as soon as it's ready. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thought
Yeah.
processes and the different things that we're looking at.
I think that gap between the ease of use and sort of the situational level for some of these things is so funny because it's like you have that on one extreme where like it is I have to control a specific spot. It is like really conscious in that way versus like me, I play like mostly Meridian, which is just like when that is up, I'm throwing that. Like maybe there's like some thought to the timing on that, but as far as like my angle or direction, like if I'm in the general vicinity of somebody, I can get value out of that like very easily versus Sabraska is that more like sharp use case. It's like can be higher highs, but potentially lower lows if you're not using it right. So really
Yeah,
interesting. We
exactly.
didn't circle back too much to the weapon changes, but I do think, with the Rattler change as well, with even just saying it takes one more bullet to kill, I do think the average person underestimates how big of a deal it can be when you see, like, even, oh, this gun is getting changed by one bullet, one damage per bullet or
Yep.
something. The increments you hit there of, like, does that take 4 or 5 shots, take somebody out, via head or body, whatever it might be, that you might not
Yeah.
consciously think about it, but that really can be a big change. So, uh, I think
I
that's
can
a
give an
good tweak.
example on
Or
that. Sorry to interrupt.
not at all.
So yeah, I mean, one change we made in the past was for one of our closed like external tests with whatever it was, the group of people that we were doing external play tests with. Um, One thing that we tried was we tried making the Arrows carbine only take one headshot and two bodies. So still 3 shots to kill, but back to how it was in Splitgate, which was one headshot and two body shots. And with that change, because we thought that that would be a strong gun, we lowered the fire rate. So it was something like 0.37 seconds between shots, where it used to be 0.35, something like that. And in that external test with a few thousand people, whatever it was, that gun was by far the best primary in the game. Like, it was not close. It was like better than some power weapons, like extremely, extremely strong. Um, so we saw that and we said, okay, like that was clearly too big of a change. It's just it's not going to work with. We'd have to lower the fire rate too much for it to work at one headshot and two bodies. So let's make it two headshots and one body. So it's still the same time to kill. You just need one more headshot out of those 3 shots to kill, in 3 shots versus in four. So we made that change, and we also increased the fire rate back to 0.35 seconds between um, gunshots. And when we made that change and we went into beta, the Aris Carbine was now the worst gun in the game. by a lot. The worst primary gun in the game by a lot, worse than some secondaries. Um, so that's like the kind of like you make one small change where it's like, okay, well, it was one headshot in two bodies. Let's make it two headshots in one body. It's still always four body shots to kill. Pretty relatively small change you might think, but that kind of change brought it from by far the best to by far the worst. And we've been like trying to meet that middle ground where we're still buffing the Arrows Carbine even in this patch.
Yeah. That's actually a great segue, Derek, which is the other thing that you had put on our short list of things to talk about was just in general with weapons, trying to move towards a little bit healthier of a place for what we'd like to see. Do you want to just mention what we're looking at there? I mean, carbines and BRs are pretty top of the mind on that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think BRs and carbines aren't necessarily in a bad spot, and that's kind of why what I talked to you about earlier, right? Was like there's kind of two groups. One is like fix the broken stuff, like the RASC usage, and then two is like tweaks to just move things into a spot that we think is healthier. And right now in ranked, regardless of if you use, an assault rifle or a carbine, like you're going to perform pretty similarly well and you're going to win a pretty similar amount of your games. But, when we look at usage, like people are using assault rifles and SMGs more um, than they are assault, carbines and battle rifles. So basically, we want to move the meta to be a little bit more rewarding of those harder to use weapons because an assault rifle, while you might not do better, it's going to be easy to use, so you can focus on other things more. Where with a carbine or a burst rifle, you can focus more on. You have to focus more on your aiming because it's precision, and you're going to get punished more for a single miss than you would with an assault rifle. So, anyways, we miss some of that more precision weapon meta. So, we're doing a buff pass on the carbines and the burst rifles across the board to make them stronger. So then it's kind of high risk, high reward with those weapons, right? Where if you hit all your shots, then we want to reward that and see the best players using carbines and burst rifles more often. Where there's also like an easier, more accessible weapon like an assault rifle for people who prefer that.
I think you brought up an interesting problem that is kind of unique to Splitgate as well, just in general with balance, is that because of how portaling works, it is like the best players are able to close those gaps so well. We're often the kind of the niche cases for a lot of those times, like the carbines and battle rifles are often traditionally like that's my long range option or that's my mid range great thing. But then if I'm able to really close that gap with somebody, like even if it's like tricky to balance those without them becoming way too good, like what I'm trying to say, it's like where like the short
Yeah, yeah,
range
exactly.
weapons inherently kind of have that edge because like you can't always guarantee that an enemy's going to stay far from you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's definitely, and especially it's another thing where it's so different between different levels of play, where a more casual player um, isn't closing distance as much, and that's something we've seen a ton with shotguns, where shotguns are really tough to balance because most players aren't able to move around the map in the same way as some of the best players in the game can. Um, so even though a shotgun might not be overpowered for most people in a more casual setting, once you get it in ranked, get it in the best player's hands, it's super strong.
Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap this one up? We
I
covered
think
most of
that's
it.
most of it. I mean, yeah, we've got a ton of smaller changes. Some changes to fast swapping. We've seen some people using stuff like two plow shotguns or shotgun plus the Goliath. Some really popular combos there that we're getting rid of. And this is we've got a ton of changes. I've got a huge list, but I don't want to go through everything, and I don't want to commit to specific values because we're still testing and iterating on this. But um, yeah, I mean, excited to get in everybody's hands and see because, like you mentioned earlier, on paper versus in people's hands, things always change.
Yeah, and we have more updates that will be arriving for ranked as well, just helping to address some of those bugs that we talked about last week. Matchmaking and gains, losses, just variety of kind of quality of life stuff that also will come into rank. But yeah, we're really excited to give you the scoop on the specifics of all those balance changes very soon when that patch arrives. And I think that's basically all we've got for this one. So Derek, thank you for joining me, and I will let you get back to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, catch you later.